I love John Denver. I think he is an amazing soul. I remember, I don't know when that song came out, maybe the 70s, whatever. I remember I was young, and unfortunately, the immaturity of a lot of the world was like, sitting around a campfire and everybody is high. Oh, yeah, loaded. Hi, I love that. John Denver's getting loaded in the mountains. And I, I think, I just think that minimizes the power of that song, because I believe that he's inviting us into a church, a temple, a practice that from the words you can tell just meant so much to him. Born in his 22nd year, uh, a place, coming home to a place he'd never been before. Wow, I mean, that's so powerful. And I often wonder what John Denver, what that experience was like for him, or those. We know that he spent a lot of time in nature. We know he lived in Colorado, off and on, among other places. Um, and what transformative power that was. Because like anybody else and everybody else, he had his issues. He had his challenges. Going back to his childhood, coming through adulthood with various relationships, existing within the music industry, all kinds of challenges. And yet, we know somehow that there was a touchstone of that place of discovering a truth that transcended all of that. Years ago, I had the privilege of serving on an editorial board for a newspaper, and several years ago, God, it's been a long time now, Paradise actually had a newspaper that was pretty amazing. It was an award-winning paper for its size, and in the old newspaper world, you were kind of classified within your subscribership, and so obviously the New York Times has its subscribership, and the Enterprise Record has its, and the Chronicle, and whatever. And within its subscribership classification, the Paradise Post won all kinds of state awards through those associations, and actually, in my association with it, won a couple of national awards. It was pretty amazing, and they had some really great editors there. And I was doing some work with them as a freelance illustrator, and I got to know one of the editors really well, and so she invited me to come onto the editorial board. And so I went on that board, and when you're on an editorial, at least that was my only experience with editorial board, doing that. It was great. I got to write a few editorials. It was cool. The paper came out 3 times a week. And so there were about 5 of us on that board, 4 or 5 of us. And so there was the editor, and then I was associated with the paper. She got some people from the community at large, kind of community leaders, people from nonprofits and things like that she had run into and she attracted. And we were all pretty diverse, and it was just a really great experience. And so, when we first came onto the board, each of us, we kind of talked about, our backgrounds, what we do for a living, where we're from. It was kind of light stuff, and so, but over time, we used to meet once a week, and over time, we'd look at political issues, cultural issues, society issues, most of it pretty local, a little bit of California, things like that. Once in a while, we'd take on kind of a national thing if it had a local bearing. And so anyway, we would debate it, and we would talk about it, and the idea was to arrive at the position that our editorial would take on that issue. And so we had to look at 3 issues every week. And so during the course of that, when you're in a room with people, you kind of start to get to know things about them, morals, ethics, even like religious ideas, not overtly, but, because some things that come up, as we know, here it is, as we know in our culture, things come up that, cultural issues, religious issues, more even if it's budgets and whatever, what direction's the school board going or whatever, there's going to be some of that. It gets into it, right? And so you sort of get a feel for people in terms of philosophy, religiosity, spirituality, or not, And so I served on that board for quite a while with this one gentleman from the community, and I didn't know him very well. And this one day I ran into him in the community, and we were kind of talking. And I had picked up on the fact that he was obviously a very religious person, and very, very, came from the very Christian kind of world and stuff. But he was really great to work with. I mean, I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. Everybody's great to work with. Oh my God, that one kind of slipped out. Ooh, sorry. Can I pull that back? Okay. But anyway, I hit it off with him. And so anyway, and so he asked, and he had picked up on some stuff from me. So he said, Andy, what do you believe spiritually? And so okay, it's like that the elevator talk, right? And so I kind of talked to him about spiritual laws and working with spirit and energy, energies and all those kinds of things, and some stuff about eternal life and where we feel the universe comes from our point of view and stuff. And so he said, do you go to church for that? and I said, yeah. I said I attend the Center for Spiritual Living. He said, oh, he said, I've driven by there. I've always wondered what they're about. I said, so you guys are a bunch of nature worshipers, huh? Yeah. And it was really interesting, because I didn't overtly go John Denver, but somewhere, he was very perceptive. He picked up on it, right? Spiritual law, what is, and what's interesting is, the major piece of work that our founder Ernest Holmes did was a book called Science of Mind. Now he did some other books too, but that's and we love all his work. But that's, it's a big kind of a thick, textbooky kind of thing, kind of a heavy read sometimes. And so I am in that book all the time. If you were to find my copy, I've got it underlined, highlighted, I've got notes, because I'm one of those people. I write notes in books, drive my mother crazy. But anyway, I do that. And so anyway, I have a concordance, and it tells me where to go in the book for certain things. According to the concordance, in just the one book, Science of Mind, Ernest Holmes refers to nature 101 times. 101 different passages where he uses the word nature. And so, a lot of it is the nature of us. There is the nature. And the quotes about nature in there, are just absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to share my favorite quotes of Ernest Holmes around nature today as I get going here. This idea of, like what the song says, what do we find in nature that speaks to what it is to be a human being? So now I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. So prepare for a little bit of whiplash, okay? So I'm going to come up with a metaphor, so I got to lay the groundwork for that. A while back, I was on YouTube, quite a while back, and I love watching programs. I love watching stuff on YouTube that take you behind the scenes of natural history museums. I'm a natural history museum freak. I love California Academy of Science in San Francisco. I love that, And so I was on the Chicago Field Museum of Natural History on their website, or somewhere on YouTube. I don't know what it was, a program they were doing. And so they were with this expert, obviously in a museum like that, a natural history expert, degrees up the wazoo, PhDs, all this kind of stuff. And they were going into their specimen collections. And so on this particular episode, he pulled out the specimen collection of flying squirrels. I had no idea there were so many flying squirrels in the world. And some of them are like big. They're like flying beavers, some of them are real little. They occupy all kinds of different places on the planet, right? And so he pulls out these drawers of these specimens, some of them, 1900, 1920s, whatever, they're out there. And he pulls them up and he talks about them and he shows the similarities and he shows the differences and the size. And he talks about, what's important is the environments in which they lived, what type of forest they were in, what the foliage was, But every single one of them, had some stuff in common that made them part of the Flying Squirrel Club, right? But they were all kinds of different colors. And again, he pulls up this one, and it's like, whoa! If this thing came at you, like, you'd be running, it's like, and so he's talking about, going into kind of evolution 101, about natural selection in terms of, so here comes up through the evolutionary chain, becomes a squirrel of some kind, and then continues to evolve to where it can glide from tree to tree. That's what and we all know that. So what they have in common is they have that kind of flap under their arms. They have a little hook in their tail. I don't know if you know that. It's like an aircraft carrier. They got a hook so they can grab, and their claws are a certain way, right? They all have that in common, but natural selection. Think about that. Natural selection. And I know Darwin came up with that. And so what that implies is, who's doing the selecting? That's a really interesting question. So I'm a squirrel. I find myself in a particular environment. And me and my kinfolk, my ancestors and my descendants, we're looking for a way to be in that environment that is optimal to us having the life we want. Isn't that amazing? Which means that within this thing we call nature, there is this idea of where is it that I belong? And in the case of us, what we talk about in this room, where do I belong spiritually? That's a really interesting question. When we think of it from terms of natural selection, which is our selection. So yesterday I'm up at the Silmar with all my cronies up there, and the CSL crew is up there, and we were having a conversation about what we can learn about spirituality through nature. And everyone just lit up. I mean, like you threw a cigarette lighter and a bunch of fireworks, right? Everybody's talking, and I'm sitting in the room, and have you ever been around a bird's nest, and they're all chirping at the same time, right? And that's the way we are. If you were in that room, you hear all this chirping and talking and stuff, right? And I don't know who said what, because we're all so excited. We're just talking over each other about what we can learn from nature, right? It's one of those kinds of conversations. Somewhere in the nest of chirpers yesterday, I heard one of my colleagues say, nature is, how did she say this? Nature is the most transparent veil to spirit. And I just was, oh my God. That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. In terms of, and I know this is very kind of esoteric, and this is like, how does this really apply to life? So I want to talk about that in terms of how it applies to life. So a while, I have been introduced to two people in my life. One of them a young woman, one of them a young man. The young woman was an acquaintance of some kind, and I got to know her, and she was somebody who grew up in an urban environment, like Bay Area, Southern California, somewhere, I don't know where she grew up, and she was right in the middle. She wasn't in the burbs, she was right in the middle of it. And she, traffic and people and populations and noise and all of that. And so she grew up in that environment. She went to school with her family, went on. Then she went to college, and she went to a college that was in some heavy urban environment, and she did graduate work. She ended up with a master's degree, so she was there for a long time. And so, again, that same environment. Now, the thing was, all through her life, she struggled with mental health issues, and what I mean, I'm not talking about diagnosable, I'm talking about she had anxiety, sadness, loneliness, and she had a great family and everything. And she had those struggles throughout her life. So somewhere when she was older, probably maybe in college or whatever, she actually got some exposure to some nature. She went with a bunch of friends to somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. And she thought it was great. She thought it was wonderful and everything. And so she comes back and she's doing her, finishing up and what am I going to do with my career? And finally, she went to the issues with anxiety and depression and loneliness were so overbearing, she started to go to a counselor to deal with that. And so the counselor said, has there ever been a place where you felt really calm? She said, yeah, when I went with my friends out in the middle of nowhere, that was really great. She goes, well, I would encourage you to spend some time in nature and go out there and see what's going on with you. So she did, and she found out, like, oh my God. It was like all those energies and stuff could just flow out of her. And so she was someone who was fortunate enough to be able to make her living completely online. And so she ended up, out in the middle of nowhere with a cabin and working online. And she talked about how all of those issues went away. And she talked about how nature was teaching her how to live, because it was such a new experience to her that she walked in the rain, she walked in the snow, she walked in the heat, and she walked in the fall, and she waded in the streams, and she looked closely at the ferns, and she stood among the trees, and everything, and she just felt like she was being shown a way to live. So I'm sure that, there were people in her family, what's up with that Mary? Oh my God, she goes, and now, she goes out there in the woods and she's living in a cabin and she's nature girl and she works out there. What's up with her? Well, we'd say, wow, she found her place. She found her place to look into the nature of herself, because that's what she found. Now, I got person number 2. A young gentleman who's a member of my family who I love dearly. Now, he was raised in nature. He was raised in the woods. He was raised in rural Northern California, right? And so he did his, grew up and went to school and all that sort of thing. He finally reaches an age where he can decide to go do what he wants to do in the world, and he was drawn to the urban America. And so he took himself right into the middle of the city and the urban world. And in that place, he has thrived. He has moved beyond his sadness. He has moved beyond his anxiety. He has moved beyond his loneliness because he loves the heartbeat of the city. He loves being exposed to other cultures, other music. He loves finding those special places out there, those special people out there, and to work in that environment and live in that environment. And when you spend time with him, if you ever meet him out in the country and then you follow him and you take Bart into the city and you spend time with him, you can tell he's there. He's with his people, right? Because that is where he has found the nature of himself. And there's people in the family who say, what's up with that Jimmy? We don't understand. Why in the world is he down there in that city? Because he has found the heartbeat of nature that has aligned with him. It's about an alignment. That's what Ernest Holmes understood. That's what John Denver found in the Rockies, but other people find in the middle of a city. If we find our place, natural selection. Natural selection. Where do I find my nature? Where do I find my way to be? So I want to share with you 2 pieces that Ernest Holmes wrote, and I apologize, they're a little bit lengthy, that I love so much that he wrote, that goes to what I'm saying. Ernest Holmes says, personal bondage is not God-ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. One's infinite truth points to freedom. That's what the squirrels were doing. Under natural law. Thus, the inherent nature of us is forever seeking to express in terms of freedom. For nature's gift is health through a restorative power. Oh my God. That's amazing. That's what the squirrels were doing. That's what the 2 squirrels I just told you about are doing. Through their own natural selection. Natural selection. What is it that our soul aligns with? Then Holmes goes on. The greatest teachers looked so deeply into nature that she revealed a fundamental simplicity. Suffering is not imposed upon us. It is because of our ignorance of our true nature. Our true nature. And this is the last piece. All receive some light, and this light is always the same light. For all invention, art, and wisdom has come from humanity, has been given to us through those who have deeply penetrated the secrets of nature and thus the mind of spirit. For love always rules through the laws of nature, our divine nature. I love that. The veil to our truth, the veil that we can look through is a veil of nature, so that we can each become the flying squirrel we were meant to be through our natural selection. And God bless both those squirrels I told you about on their journey. Thank you very much. All right.